Hello and welcome to the session on Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytic theory. Introduction and structure of personality. All the theories in psychology that see human functioning based upon the interaction of drives and forces within the person fall under psychodynamic theory. Freud's psychoanalysis was the original psychodynamic theory. His psychoanalytic theory is described under three main headings: structure of personality, dynamics of personality, and development of personality. Structure of personality. In order to describe the structure of personality, the two models have been developed: topographical model and dynamic or structural model. Topographical model. According to Freud, the human mind has three levels of consciousness: the conscious, the preconscious, and the unconscious. The conscious mind is that layer of mind which contains memories, thoughts, and desires of which we are aware at a given moment. Conscious state is related to the immediate experiences. As a result, conscious state represents the short and limited aspect of personality. The preconscious mind is the layer that stands between conscious and unconscious parts of mind and refers to those experiences of which the individual is not aware of a given moment, but which could be recalled easily. The third is the unconscious mind. Many of the experiences conflicting with the needs, wishes, etc. of the individual may be immensely painful and hence may create strong anxiety to the organism. To escape from this danger, such experiences are pushed down into the bottom of the mind. Hence, at a given time, the organism will not be aware of these suppressed experiences. Neither can it bring these to the surface by ordinary means. This hidden area of the mind is called unconscious mind. Freud saw it as a dumb box for urges, feelings, and ideas that are tied to anxiety, conflict, and pain. We can use the metaphor of an iceberg to help us in understanding Freud's topographical model. Only 10% of iceberg is visible, that is conscious, whereas the other 90% is beneath water, that is preconscious and unconscious. Dynamic or structural model. Freud believed that personality structure is composed of three major systems: the it, the ego, and the superego. Each of these systems has its own properties and mechanisms, but they interact with one another closely, and the human personality is the outcome of such an interaction. The it. The it is the original system of personality. It is from this that the ego and the superego become differentiated. It is instinctual in nature. It is also the reservoir of psychic energy, which is called the libidinal energy. It furnishes all the energy for the functioning of ego and the superego as well. It operates on the pleasure principle, and it has only one motive, namely deriving pleasure for the individual. As such, it is not concerned with good or bad, right or wrong, real or unreal. This means that for the reduction of tension, it chooses a path which is most pleasurable to the individual. Since it cannot tolerate increase of energy, which when pent up produces tension, it functions in a manner helpful for discharging the psychic energy, thereby restoring the organism to a comfortably constant and low energy level. There are two processes employed by it for the fulfillment of its goal. They are reflex action and primary process. Reflex actions are inborn and automatic, like sneezing and blinking. They reduce the tension immediately. The primary process attempts to discharge the function by formulating an image of an object or action that will provide pleasure. The pleasure thus derived is unrealistic and only temporary. So, a secondary psychological process starts developing. The ego. The ego develops out of it in order to facilitate the goals of it in a more acceptable manner and without causing danger to the individual. This is done by deriving energy from the it. Apart from it, ego has no existence as it is a reservoir of all energy. While it functions on the pleasure principle, the ego obeys the reality principle. The ego distinguishes between the subjective experiences and the objective truth. The ego operates by means of the secondary process. It is realistic thinking. It is interested only in whether an experience is painful or pleasurable. The relationship between the ego and it is intimate and complex. The ego may be servile and try at all costs to remain on good terms with the it, or the ego's concern with self-preservation may cause it to contest the impulsive it. Freud once said, "Imagine that the relationship between the ego and the it is similar to the relationship between a horse, that is it, and its rider, that is ego. While the rider usually determines the direction of the horse, there are those times when it is the horse who leads the rider." Freud regards decisions about when to bridle its passions and bow before reality and when to side with them and take arms against the external world as the ego's highest function. The superego. According to psychoanalytic theory, infants have no sense of right and wrong. Recall that only the amoral it is present at birth. At first, this function is carried out by the parents on whom the helpless child must depend for many years. They reward certain behaviors, gratifying reassurance of their presence and affection. But they also punish other actions, a threatening sign that the child has lost their love and is now at the mercy of an awesome and dangerous environment. Partly to protect itself from such disasters and partly because it identifies with the all-powerful parents, the ego begins to internalize their standards. This leads to the formation of the superego, a special part of the ego that observes and sits in judgment above the rest. The superego is partly conscious and partly unconscious. It starts to develop out of the ego during the 3rd to 5th year of life and continues to introject characteristics of teachers, teenage idols, and other authority figures, though these usually remain of secondary importance. Since the parents indirectly reflects the demands of society, the superego helps perpetuate the status quo. The superego includes two components: the conscience punishes illicit thoughts and actions, and the ego ideal rewards desirable behavior. A person who refuses to cheat or steal even though no one else is watching, or who strives to do the best possible job without being supervised, is responding to the dictates of the superego. For behaving in such acceptable ways, the superego rewards the ego with feeling of pride and virtue. Unfortunately, psychic life is rarely this much pleasant. Much of the superego lies in the unconscious, where it is intimately related to the it. It condemns its illicit impulses as severely as actual misdeeds, but can directly influence only the ego. Therefore, both forbidden impulses and unacceptable behaviors cause tension to be generated between the superego and ego, and this is experienced by the ego as guilt or moral anxiety. Thus, Freudian theory regards the idea of a guilty conscience as a misnomer. Emotions occur only in the ego, so the conscience causes the ego to feel guilty. You feel guilty and anxious not only when you do something wrong, but also when you want to do something wrong, even if your illicit wishes beyond your awareness. Even though the ego may be unaware of the reasons for these unpleasant feelings, it is obliged to do something about them. It can obtain relief by substituting more acceptable thoughts or actions, or by resorting to defense mechanisms. It is possible for the superego to be underdeveloped, leaving the individual without effective inner guidelines. Children brought up without love do not introject proper standards, lack appropriate tension between the ego and superego, and have few qualms about aggressing against others. More often, however, the superego proves to be a harsh master and another potential source of danger. It may become so perfectionist and unrealistic that genuine achievements seem worthless. For example, a student who gives an excellent speech before a large group may feel little satisfaction because she made a few minor errors, or the superego may overstep its bounds and punish legitimate behavior. Dynamics of personality. Personality develops in response to four major sources of tension: physiological growth processes, frustrations, conflicts, and threats. As a direct consequence of increases in tension emanating from these sources, the person is forced to learn new methods of reducing tension. Identification and displacement are two methods by which the individual learns to resolve frustrations, conflicts, and anxieties. Identification. Identification may be defined as a method by which a person takes over the features of another person and makes them a corporate part of his or her own personality. One learns to reduce tension by modeling one's behavior after that of someone else. Freud preferred the term identification to the more familiar imitation. He felt that imitation denotes a kind of superficial and transient coping behavior, and he wanted a word that would convey the idea of a more or less permanent acquisition to personality. We choose as models those who seem to be more successful in gratifying their needs than we are. The child identifies with its parents. They appear to be omnipotent, at least during the years of early childhood. As children grow older, they find other people to identify with whose accomplishments are more in line with their current wishes. Most of this identification takes place unconsciously and not, as it may sound, with conscious intention. This emphasis upon unconscious modeling distinguishes Freud's identification from Bandura's observational learning. One usually selects and incorporates just those features that he or she believes will help achieve a desired goal. There is a good deal of trial and error in the identification process because one is usually not quite sure what it is about another person that accounts for their success. One may identify with animals, imaginary characters, institutions, abstract ideas, and inanimate objects, as well as with other human beings. Displacement. When an original object choice of an instinct is rendered inaccessible by external or internal barriers, a new cathexis is formed unless a strong repression occurs. If this new cathexis is also blocked, another displacement takes place, and so on, until an object is found that yields some relief for the pent-up tension. This object is then cathected until it loses its power to reduce tension, at which time another search for an appropriate goal object is constitute in such large measure the development of personality, the source and aim of the instinct remain constant. As a consequence of numerous displacements, a pool of undischarged tension accumulates that acts as permanent motivating force for behavior. The person is constantly seeking new and better ways of reducing tension. Defense mechanisms. Anxiety comes from realistic sources in the external world and conflict within one's own mind. A common conflict is when it desires something that ego and or superego do not agree with. An important function of the ego is to operate defense mechanisms. Some of the important defense mechanisms are given below. Denial. Refusing to believe or even to perceive some threat in the external world. For example, I did not fail my exam, it must be a mistake. Repression. Unconsciously eliminating threatening material from consciousness and using anti-cathexis to prevent it from regaining consciousness, thus being unable to recall it. Regression. Unconsciously adopting behavior typical of an earlier and safer time in one's life. A reverse flow of libido to an object previously abandoned or to an earlier psychosexual stage. Reaction formation. Repressing threatening beliefs, emotions or impulses and unconsciously replacing them with their opposites. Projection. Unconsciously attributing one's own threatening impulses, emotions or beliefs to other people or things. Rationalization. Using and believing superficially plausible explanations in order to justify illicit behavior and reduce feelings of guilt. Intellectualization. Unconsciously separating threatening emotions from the associated thoughts or events and reacting on only an intellectual level. Displacement. Transferring behaviors or emotions, often unconsciously, from one object to another that is less threatening. Sublimation. Unconsciously channelizing illicit instinctual impulses into socially acceptable behavior, a form of displacement but one that represents ideal behavior. Development of personality. Freud believed that the child is father to the man. In fact, he made the rather startling assertion that the basic foundation of an individual's personality has been laid down by the tender age of 5. To shed light on these crucial early years, Freud formulated a stage theory of development. He emphasized how young children deal with their immature but powerful sexual urges. He used the term sexual in general way to refer to many urges for physical pleasure. According to Freud, these sexual urges shift in focus as children progress from one stage of development to another. Indeed, the names for the stages oral, anal, genital and so on are based on where children are focusing their erotic energy during that period. Thus, psychosexual stages are developmental periods with a characteristic sexual focus that leave their mark on adult personality. Freud theorized that each psychosexual stage has its own unique developmental challenges or tasks. The way these challenges are handled supposedly shapes personality. The process of fixation plays an important role in this process. Fixation is a failure to move forward from one stage to another as expected. Essentially, the child's development stalls for a while. Fixation can be caused by excessive gratification of needs at a particular stage or by excessive frustration of those needs. Either way, fixations left over from childhood affect adult personality. Generally, fixation leads to an overemphasis on the psychosexual needs prominent during the fixated stage. Freud described a series of 5 psychosexual stages. Let us examine some of the highlights in this sequence. Oral stage. This stage encompasses the first year of life. During this period, the main source of erotic stimulation is the mouth in biting, sucking, chewing and so on. In Freud's view, the way the child's feeling experiences is handled is crucial to subsequent development. He attributed considerable importance to the manner in which the child is weaned from the breast or the bottle. According to Freud, fixation at the oral stage could form the basis for obsessive eating or smoking later in life, among many other things. Anal stage. In their second year, children get their erotic pleasure from their bowel movements through either the expulsion or retention of fecus. The crucial event at this time is toilet training, which represents society's first systematic effort to regulate the child's biological urges. Severely punitive toilet training leads to a variety of possible outcomes. For example, excessive punishment might produce a latent feeling of hostility toward the trainer, usually the mother. This hostility might generalize to women as a class. Another possibility is that heavy reliance on punitive measures could lead to an association between genital concerns and the anxiety that the punishment arouses. This genital anxiety derived from severe toilet training could evolve into anxiety about sexual activities later in life. Phallic stage. Around age 4, the genitals become the focus for the child's erotic energy, largely through self-stimulation. During this pivotal stage, the Oedipal complex emerges. That is, little boys develop an erotically tinged preference for their mother. They also feel hostility toward their father, whom they view as a competitor for mom's affection. Similarly, little girls develop a special attachment to their father. Around the same time, they learn that little boys have different genitals and supposedly develop penis envy. According to Freud, young girls feel hostile toward their mother because they blame her for their anatomical deficiency. To summarize, in the Oedipal complex, children manifest erotically tinged desire for their opposite sex parent, accompanied by feeling of hostility toward their same sex parent. The name for this syndrome was taken from a tragic myth from ancient Greece. In the story, Oedipus was separated from his parents at birth. Not knowing the identity of his real parents, when he grew up, he inadvertently killed his father and married his mother. According to Freud, the way parents and children deal with the sexual and aggressive conflicts inherent in the Oedipal complex is of paramount importance. The child has to resolve the Oedipal dilemma by purging the sexual longings for the opposite sex parent and by crushing the hostility felt toward the same sex parent. In Freud's view, healthy psychosexual development hinges on the resolution of the Oedipal conflict, because continued hostility toward the same sex parent may prevent the child from identifying adequately with that parent. Freudian theory predicts that without such identification, sex typing, conscience and many other aspects of the child's development won't progress as they should. Latency and genital stages. From around age 6 through puberty, the child's sexuality is largely suppressed. It becomes latent. Important events during this latency stage center on expanding social contacts beyond the immediate family. With puberty, the child progresses into the genital stage. Sexual urges reappear and focus on the genitals once again. At this point, sexual energy is normally channeled toward peers of the other sex rather than toward oneself, as in the phallic stage. In arguing that the early years shape personality, Freud did not mean that personality development comes to an abrupt halt in middle childhood. However, he did believe that the foundation for adult personality has been solidly entrenched by this time. He maintained that future developments are rooted in early formative experiences and that significant conflicts in later years are replace of crisis from childhood. In fact, Freud believed that unconscious sexual conflicts rooted in childhood experiences cause most personality disturbances. His steadfast belief in the psychosexual origins of psychological disorders eventually led to bitter theoretical disputes with two of his most brilliant colleagues, Carl Jung and Alfred Adler. Jung and Adler both argued that Freud overemphasized sexuality. Freud rejected their ideas, and the other two theories felt compelled to go their own way, developing their own theories of personality. Let us summarize what we have discussed so far. This chapter provides a detailed analysis of Freud's psychoanalytic theory. This theory is described under three headings: structure of personality, dynamics of personality, and development of personality. In order to describe the structure of personality, two models, topographical and dynamic, have been developed by Freud. He conceived human mind in terms of three different levels of consciousness. Freud maintained that personality consists of three structures, namely it, ego, and superego. According to Freud, instincts are the ultimate cause of all behavior. In his theory, he describes defense mechanisms. Freud described human development as passing through different stages. They are oral stage, anal stage, phallic stage, latency stage, and genital stage. Now, you can try to answer the questions given here. What are the main features of Freud's psychoanalytic theory? Explain the structure of personality from psychoanalytic point of view. What are the stages of psychosexual development? What do you mean by defense mechanisms? How they tend to reduce anxiety? Discuss the major systems of personality structure. Hope that you may go through these books for reference. An Introduction of Theories of Personality by Evan R.B. Lawrence Elbaum Associate Publishers, London in 2003. Psychology, Themes and Variations by Wayton W. Wordsworth, Canada in 2007. Personality, 2nd edition, Lazarus, Angel Woodcliffe, Prentice Hall in the year 1971. Thank you for watching this program. We can meet again with another topic. Have a nice day.